And we have, if you look at a couple of passages, I think David Klein's noted Old Testament scholar points out that if you look at, say, Deuteronomy 23, which again mentions a foreign runaway slave who comes to Israel, he is allowed to settle in any of Israel's cities. So he's running away, presumably from an oppressive master, and is able to settle within Israel rather than, as countries typically did, they had extradition treaties to send runaway slaves back to their masters. And if you harbored a runaway slave, you're liable to the death penalty. But here, the nation of Israel is told, let these foreign runaway slaves settle in any of Israel's cities, and the implication being to care for the foreigner rather than to oppress the foreigner further. And so there's a free choice in there, the freedom to run away and not be subject to harsh oppression in those nations. And you also have David Klein's mentioned.
Sorry, did you want to say something?
There are very few times that I want to say to somebody, can you put that in a syllogism for me? Mm-hmm. In fact, this is the only time that I can think that I've wanted to do that. But that last jump that he did there, right? You have foreigners that can escape. I'm like, I'm with you. That's what it is. Everybody thinks that Deuteronomy 23, 15 to 16 is about any slave in Israel can just run away from any master, and that's it. Everything's done. So he's right? I'm glad that he knows this, that this is about foreigners coming in Israel. Read through the book of Deuteronomy. They're not supposed to have extradition treaties because those countries, Deuteronomy 20, those countries that are in cities that are outside, they're vassals. That's what the text is calling for. Kill everybody in Canaan. All the other cities around you are vassals. So you wouldn't have extradition treaties with them. They're not supposed to, is the point. Anyway, I'm not what would I be to have to like an international diplomacy or international law specialist? I'm just not. Anyway, the point is, but so I'm glad that he knows that. Like, I'm glad that he's saying that. But then to say did I hear him that, and maybe we should play it again just so that I feel like I heard him well.
Let's, I can definitely rewind.
Just go back like 5 seconds. I think it'll get it.
And so there's a free choice in there, the freedom to run away and not be subject to harsh oppression.
Of course, of the foreign slave, of the foreigner from another nation coming to Israel. He needs to go read. I think Sam Gringus wrote on this, but nobody should quote me on that. I don't remember. Samuel Gringus has a 2012, I think, volume on slavery or on the laws. And he's got a big section on slavery. But the point here, at least one of the major points, is that this is like, the point is not, the point is to make sure that you're not somebody that's harboring a slave. Like, that's what the argument is here. You don't notice that you don't take them into your house and care for them. The text, if you read it, it says you do this, no touchy.
No touchy.
Where's that from? That's from
Arrested Development?
Arrested Development. Yeah, in the jail. No touching. But like, I feel like we just got a lot closer, John, just through that, the Arrested Development thing. But going from making this leap, like premise 1, premise 2, right? Foreigners can escape, no extradition treaties. Therefore, any slave can run away as your conclusion. What? Yeah. No, he's very specific. And then it seems like he just opens it up to any slave in Israel can run away. And that's it. If he gets away, he's good to go. Like, I don't understand. Maybe that's not what he meant,
Well, I don't know if it's what Paul Copan meant, but I have heard multiple people make the argument that slaves were freely able to leave oppressive masters, like whenever they wanted to, and the Israelites were to not return them to their masters, that they were to keep them and everything like that. And of course, they cite the section that is about, no extradition to other countries kind of thing. But so, I mean, I have heard that, and I definitely thought that Paul Copan was sitting there like, oh yeah, foreign slaves, they come in, they're fleeing oppressive masters, the Israelites aren't supposed to give them back.
I was excited.
So all slaves could have this free choice of just leaving their master. And I'm just sitting there like, who the fuck? What the fuck is he reading?
I have to point out, Heathen Queen correctly has said it's also from the Emperor's New Groove. And I think actually that's where I was remembering it from. No touchy, no touchy, no touch.
Oh, really? See, with that, I always think of the dad in the jail cell, and he gets mad, I think at one of his sons or somebody, and like the guards are like, no touching. He's like, no touching.
Yeah, definitely. But I think that's Cusco, the Emperor in the Emperor's New Groove. He's like, no touchy, no touch.
Right.
Yeah. So I stand corrected. But yeah, so I don't think we have to go into the argument for why it's not, specifically why it can't be an Israelite that's anticipated in the text. Because if you look at Deuteronomy 23:15-16, it says they can settle wherever they want in whatever city, right? Well, that doesn't make any sense because they would go back to their land.
Right.
They had land. They wouldn't settle wherever. They'd go back to their land anyway. And that people can read Raymond Westbrook on that, or Samuel Gringus, really anybody.
All right. He's got a little bit more that he says on this particular topic, so maybe he'll clear it up a little bit. Let's hope that he clears up his point.
That you have in chapter 21 of Exodus, that there's a servant who says, I love my master, my employer, the person with whom I'm contracted. And that person can choose to live with that person permanently. And so you can, and this is, of course, the ideal situation. And basically, if you can choose by your own free will to be a servant, or you could choose to run away from a bad situation, David Klein says this fundamentally deconstructs slavery or servitude as an institution. You can actually, you're not being held against your will. You can actually leave this negative situation.
I would love to see, I would love to see where David Klein writes that. And now I'm going to have to go look, because he's got a really great 3-volume commentary on Job. And he may talk about it there, because in Job 31, right, Job talks about how he doesn't oppress, he doesn't withhold justice from his slaves. But I think he actually makes the argument there that that's sort of rhetoric. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I mean, that's just not the case, right? And if David Klein does say that, I'm disappointed.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, this whole assertion because I thought that he might clarify, that he was only talking about foreign slaves, but he seems to seamlessly transition into talking about just all slaves, because I know that you were nodding in agreement with the whole idea of choosing to become part of a master's household and all this other stuff because they love the master and everything like that. Now, is that talking about like all forms of slaves, or is it like debt slaves? Or
it's Israelites that they're talking about, right?
Okay.
So this is far more nuanced, I think, than he's laying this out to be, which is frustrating. So in Exodus 21, 2-6, you have the male debt slave, the male Israelite debt slave that's being described. What happens? Then in verses 7-11, it's the female slave, the Amah. Okay, so in 2-6, he says, as you know very well, if he's sells himself as a slave, or he's purchased as a slave, served for 6 years, released in the 7th. If he comes in with a wife, goes out with a wife. Comes in single, goes out single. If he comes in single, and the by the way, it's scary now to hear apologists talk about this. Scary, because they realize what they're saying, or what the text says, and they're just biting the bullet now, and it's frightening. If he comes in single, the master gives him a wife, ostensibly a slave. When his term of service is up, he has to make a choice. He can go out free, because that's how he came in, and the wife and any children are the master's, because they're his property. So he can go out without his wife and kids, or he can say, I love my wife and kids, love my master, going to stay, and he becomes a chattel slave. The Israelite becomes a chattel slave. Just so everybody heard me say that. Because that's what a chattel slave is. Doesn't mean that they're furniture. If one more person says that to me, like so that's what Exodus 21 is doing. It's not like yeah. So then Deuteronomy 15 is sort of working off of Exodus 21, the covenant code, and making it more utopian. Think about some of the differences. Exodus 21 says 6 years, goes out in the seventh, no debt, right? He's free and clear. Well, Deuteronomy 15 is like, well, I mean, that's good and all, but now you got to give him a whole bunch of monetary. You got to give him like from your wine press and from your grain, and like you got to give him provisions when he goes out so that he doesn't fall back into debt servitude. So it's like reworking and again making slightly more, much more utopian, the concepts that you see in the covenant code. One of them here is, it doesn't talk about, like I haven't read Deuteronomy 15 in a while, but it's like it focuses in on I love my master. So yeah, but I mean, like I don't understand his point. I mean, if his point is, sorry, go ahead. Maybe you can tell me what you think his point is.
Well, yeah. So the general vibe that I get from this section is that they're trying to really sweeten up like slavery as it's practiced in Israel through, what we know in the Old Testament. And it seems like what he's saying is that slavery was not abusive or oppressive or anything like that. In fact, slaves often chose to become part of the master's households because they loved the master so much. Like they were so pleased with being the master's, slave or servant that they were like, please, can I become part of your family? And so they willingly made the free choice to become part of the family, be adopted into the family. So to me, it sounds like they're trying to really sweeten up what Israelite or slavery in Israel was like. Yeah. And that's that it was like a vacation, or
and they're not adopted, right? Like that's they're a slave. Like I don't, this is so weird to me. Like, this is why I say apologists now, I heard one recently, like come out very clearly about this. Well, of course, the wife and children don't go out with the man. The master gave them to him. Like, is this thing on? Like, do you know what, can you hear yourself? I play that back for him, They'd like, really what you wanted to say? Because that should be the point where you go, hold on a second. That sounds pretty bad. But anyway, I don't know. It's just scary to me.
Yeah, no, it's totally scary to me too. And I think it's really gross how they are trying to make slavery look better than it actually is in Israel. And they have to pull this equivocation game and everything like that.